Welcome to Voices of Influence. It is October, and as you well know, it is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. This is the subject that we should be talking about 365 days a year. But because it's October, I brought you a panel of experts that I want you to learn from today. And I want to talk about more than just the obvious things that we always talk about. So stay tuned as we introduce an amazing panel of specialists today. Bringing to the stage, we've got Miss Dr. Lakshmi Emery, and I'm so excited to have you. Joining our conversation is also Miss Erica Bracy and Miss Latia Maxwell. Ladies, in that order, I'm going to have you go around, introduce yourselves, and then let's get this conversation started.
Sounds good. So, as you said, I'm Dr. Lakshmi Emery. I am a medical doctor, an MD, and I also have a master's degree in public health. I've been in the field for over 20 years. Unbelievable sometimes to think about it. But I've treated many women with breast cancer, as well as other conditions. And then I myself am a breast cancer survivor. So, in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer stage 1 that was caught on a mammogram very early. So, I didn't even have a mass, but it was caught on the x-ray of the mammogram. And so I was able to have surgery and radiation. And today I'm cancer-free, celebrating 7 years. In addition, I have family history of breast cancer. So my mother is a survivor. Unfortunately, my sister, who some may know, Ananda Lewis, recently passed of breast cancer. But lots more to come on my story. But it's complicated. It's a professional story, but also a personal story.
My name is Erica Bracy, and thank you for having me. And I am a 15-year breast cancer survivor this year. I was diagnosed in 2010 with ER positive breast cancer. I found it actually just sitting at home on the bed, just doing my thing. And something just told me to check. And I put my hand on the left side of my breast and I found a little lump. I went to get a mammogram. It showed up that, it didn't show anything. And then I went to get an ultrasound. I asked for an ultrasound because I had one in previous years and it showed up as nothing. And so I just said, can I please try to find it? Because I know I found something. I felt something and I did it and I put my hand on it, found it. And then all of a sudden it showed up on the screen. And so they took a biopsy. 7 days later, I had breast cancer. So, but I am a photographer. I am an educator. I am an advocate and I am the brave chick. And I go around and we bless people with their right now needs. And I'm just excited for, just being here and just, living this life.
I'm Latia Maxwell. I am a 2-year cancer survivor. I was diagnosed with stage 2 triple negative breast cancer in actually September of 2022. I found actually, it's ironic. I actually found my breast cancer on vacation. Twice I dismissed it, and I am grateful for a boyfriend who said to me when we were on the phone, "Do not. I'm going to hang up. Don't call me until you have made your doctor appointment." So I am so grateful for him for that. I am a mother of two. I work in corporate compliance. I love all things tea related. And I do a lot of work on the advocacy level from on the legislative and research side of breast cancer.
Excellent. Well, now everybody can see why I have you all assembled here today because we've got personal stories, but you all have found a way to create excellence by sharing, but also advocating for others. And this is the one thing that needs advocates that can relate to the story more than anything. So, Dr. Emery, I know that you shared with us your personal story, and so sorry for the world's loss of your sister.
Thank you.
Is there, I feel like there's a lesson though that
Yeah.
your sister was teaching us. And
Yeah.
if you could share more intimately versus, maybe what we've read about
Right.
it, if you could share a little bit about that and how it collides
Sure.
into your advocacy as well.
Sure. So my sister was diagnosed with the same kind of breast cancer as I have. And just as a side note, people probably wonder because both of us had it and our mother had it, whether it's genetic, whether it runs in our family. And actually, all of the genetic testing that myself, my sister, and my mother had was negative. So that brings up a point I want to talk about later in terms of genetic testing in Black women. Because I personally believe they haven't found all the genes yet. So it's important, even when you get tested for the genes in the beginning, to get tested at least every 10 years because they're always coming up and finding new genes, but more on that later. So in terms of my sister's diagnosis, she was diagnosed after I was. I was diagnosed, as I said, in 2018, and she was diagnosed right as I finished the end of my treatment. And it was, extremely devastating for me. She was my younger sister. And I just remember for some reason, when she told me that she had it, I was actually more devastated than when I was told that, that I had it. And I think part of that is because I knew some of her beliefs. She was, against vaccines. She was against some of the traditional medicine. And it's ironic because I'm a doctor, but, she would fight about it. Sometimes we would battle about it. We discuss it. And I would tell her, please, let's just do what you need to do, get this done in this way. And she felt that it was something she wanted to do her way. Now, there is a misnomer, and I think I talked about this on Entertainment Tonight, but, people say that she didn't do anything and that she just, ate salad and thought she was going to be cured. And that's not true. She actually did a lot. She actually was very careful with her diet, but she also took many supplements. She also did some traditional medicine. So, in fact, she did some radiation and some chemotherapy, but she didn't elect to do all of the traditional medicine approaches that were offered to her, namely surgery. And that's where we really, butt heads because I told her at least, go and get it taken out, which she did not want to do for various reasons. And some of that, is personal choice, but, in the end, I think if she had gone that route, she may still be with us. So in the end, if you look at some of her later interviews, she does admit that she regrets not having, done some of the traditional approaches earlier on in her diagnosis. And, to me, of course, that's heartbreaking because, as a physician, as someone who's treated people over the years, I've seen women with the exact same diagnosis that she had that are doing well today, who I helped, to get that treatment. And so as part of my healing, I'm actually on the board of an organization called Equal Hope, which is out of Chicago and out of Illinois, and works with women to really advocate for them and hold their hand while they're going through the whole process of diagnosis and treatment. So I'm really proud of that work. There'll be more work to come, which will include a foundation that I've started in my sister's name. But it's kind of, very personal. Of course, I'm getting a little choked up thinking about it, but it's something that I struggled with for years, knowing that, there was the light at the end of the tunnel was a train. And I kept trying to tell her that, you need to get this done, get this surgery done. And she absolutely refused. And at one point told me, I appreciate you respect my decision and that it's my choice. So
Wow. Yeah.
very complicated story in it, but I consider it to be tragic because I think she could have been here had she made other choices, in her treatment.
Yeah. And maybe in part of her choice, there is a lesson that people might hear different after understanding that, especially when you have a
Right.
doctor in the family
Mhm.
that you trust, that's your sister. It
Mhm.
might be unfathomable for somebody to not make that decision. We make decisions with doctors we barely know and
Exactly.
put our lives in their hands. So maybe there's just something for somebody else to say, regardless of what I'm hearing, I need to make this decision. Uh,
Exactly.
but Erica and Latia, did you ever consider not having going the route of traditional treatment that you did? I know Latia, you did a lot to supplement that as well. If you all would like to share part of your personal story.
Sure. I actually I didn't want to have any of the treatments because I didn't, again, I was 39 years old. I didn't understand. I didn't want to put anything in my body. And then a friend of mine went to, oh my God, he was Dr. Sabies. So he went to Honduras and he called me. He said, Erica, he said, I've seen things that I have not seen before happen. You got to meet Dr. Sabies. And so I ended up getting his treatment and it was $1,500. And I said, what is this for $1,500? So I purchased it. And when the box came, it was all these herbs and these liquids. And I didn't, I was like, I'm not taking this. And so I just prayed about it. And one day I just woke up and I took it. And it literally, I absolutely loved it. I saw so many different changes. But my friend also told me, because I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the natural thing. He said, Erica, he said, natural works, but it takes time. He says, so I'm not saying don't do Western medicine, but I'm just saying that you can do this in addition. So I did both. And of course, Western, my oncologist, not my oncologist, my oncologist didn't, know what the things were because they weren't properly labeled. One says CC4. And so I was like, okay, I know it sounds like some, explosives or something like that, but I'm going to take it. So I took it and then I stopped when I took my surgery, but then I just led a different, lifestyle. I became a raw vegan. I just, made sure that I was drinking my water, my teas, just making sure that I tried to keep my body in the alkaline state of, and healthy. And it definitely did, work for me. But now 15 years later, what I tell people, I'm like, look, depending, because I know more now, I mean, I understand how it's working. And, I really appreciate doctors and I love this doctor here that's with us, today.
Mhm.
But I want to make sure that I tell people that, it definitely is your choice because that's what our lives are. It's our choices, right? And people choose what they want to choose. But I do, tell people, especially when you're in those late stages, you need some help sometimes. People have stayed with us. My mother died in 2020 from breast cancer. She was at stage 4 triple negative breast cancer. It grew outside the breast. So I can actually see the first time I actually saw what, a cancer looks like that died off, but then it came back alive and, right before my eyes. But neither one of us, we didn't have the BRCA gene, so I think it could have been environmental, the same situation here. So it's a sad situation because I too, like you, have been, fighting, advocating for people for 15 years. And my own mother, I could save my own mother because she was living in silence. She didn't tell me that the lump was growing out of her breast until it was, very, very late until she got sick. Right. So, you know, I think we need to definitely continue to talk about it, tell the stories and just do our part.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you so much for sharing that, Doc.
is it okay if I jump in? I think, thinking about your mother's story and my sister's story, there are parallels. I think there's some degree of denial. And then again, we'll have to discuss the elephant in the room, which is the
Yeah.
distrust of the medical system.
Yes.
And there are a lot of reasons for that. It's not unfounded,
Yeah.
obviously, we know. But I think that's part of the reason that some people refuse treatment and some people, are not comfortable, getting some of the traditional treatments.
Yeah, for
Something we
sure.
should definitely discuss.
We'll definitely cover that next. Latia, go ahead, share for your story.
Yeah, so when I found out, everything went so fast. I did not think about not doing treatment. Because I had triple negative breast cancer, there wasn't any real alternatives. There are no really alternate treatments. So I had to go through the chemo, the surgery, the radiation, and at the time that I was diagnosed, there was the approval of what's called immunotherapy. So I went through all of that. And for me, it was like I wanted to throw everything at it. At least I can say that I tried, right? I know that there's a number of side effects. I know that there are a number of things, but at the time, my children were 16 and 7. And so it was just I was just looking at a view of I need to be here for my children. So we're going to do and try everything that's humanly possible in order to make sure that I came out on the other side. I don't have a genetic disposition to that. I don't have any of the genes that come across as potentials for breast cancer because BRCA is number one, and then there are some 2 new ones that have come out, and I think there are going to be a few more that they're looking at as well. And I don't have any of that. I don't have a family history. Nobody in my family has had breast cancer on either side of my family, and quite honestly, no one has had cancer until quite recently for any cancers on either side. I have two relatives that passed away from cancer, and I have a feeling that it might be environmental just because of the location in which I grew up in. There have been known to have been some cancer cases because of some issues within that area. And so I partially feel like that might be attributed to that. But I honestly, I didn't even think of anything else. I was just like, I literally, I got an ultrasound on September 28th, biopsy on September 29th. September 30th, I received a phone call saying that I had cancer. And on October 14th, I started chemotherapy.
Okay.
So I wasted no time.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So, Doc, I want to get some of the technical terms discussed, and then I want to lead right into the distrust of the medical system because I think that that's top of mind of reasons why we don't deal with a lot of things in our community. If you could share with us some of the subtypes of breast cancer that more of the words that some of the terms that we do hear and some that we
We
haven't.
talked about triple negative breast cancer. And so triple negative breast cancer, which is what Latia, is that correct? Was diagnosed with, is one of the more aggressive forms. And unfortunately, it's found more commonly in Black women. And so we're trying to understand why. We're trying to understand, why there's this predominance. I think, Erica, you said your mother had triple negative breast cancer as well. And because it's more aggressive, it's usually found in later stages, unfortunately. So stages, 2 or 3, or sometimes even 4, which would be the last stage. There are different treatments for the different types of cancer. And you almost have to think about cancer as, each type of cancer as a different disease. Some people say, oh, well, cancer runs in my family. My father had prostate cancer. But that really doesn't have anything to do with the breast cancer because that's a completely different disease. Then there are hormone responsive cancers like we talked about. I think, Erica, you said you had ER/PR positive breast cancer, as did I. And so usually those are cancers that respond to treatments having to do with hormones. So it's different again than triple negative because the type of treatment would be completely different. So again, even though it's cancer and it's breast cancer, it's almost like there are different diseases under this umbrella. And so when we talk about it, it's important to distinguish that. It's important to understand what type of cancer you have and what type of treatments would work best for you. I think, Latia, you mentioned that there are these new immunologic treatments, and that's really been groundbreaking. There are a lot of women who have what we call metastatic disease who are living much longer because of these treatments. So it's really, if you have to have breast cancer, it's kind of like the best time it's available than there were even, 5-10 years ago.
There's always so much conversation that happens, around breast cancer, but it's usually lumped all into one. And you don't hear
Right.
these different types and the things that are treatable and what treats what. We just really hear about that in one big lump. So thank you for sharing
Exactly.
sharing about those nuances. But let's jump into the distrust of the medical system because depending on the age of a person, we have grown up in different phases with our older relatives or maybe now ancestors in my case that grew up at a time where the doctors were not to be trusted. In your experience, Doc, what do you believe is a way to change that mindset so that people are more trusting?
Well, I think people always talk about the Tuskegee experiment and where men were allowed to have untreated syphilis. So there's a lot of misnomers about that. Some people say, oh, they were given syphilis, and that's not the case. They were diagnosed with syphilis, but they were not treated back then. And so that was in order to apparently study, the course of the disease, which is awful and horrible, but it's part of our history going way back. I think currently the mistrust of the medical system, although people refer to that, is really because there's not a lot of patient advocacy sometimes. So there are people that can find a really good doctor, a really good medical provider who can walk them through it, who have great bedside manner, who can explain things to them. And then there are those that are not, those medical professionals who are not that. And so a lot of people feel alone in their journey. A lot of people feel they're not getting all of the information they need. And so that builds distrust. So organizations like Erica's and organizations like Equal Hope that provide that patient advocacy and that handholding for women and for patients as they go through this journey are really important in that space. So I was previously the chief medical officer for major health insurer, and we made sure that we had community health workers who would go out and educate people about different health conditions, and would help them to get the appointments that they needed, would even provide transportation to the appointments, because there are a lot of things that can get in the way of treatment other than just someone's opinions, things like childcare. If you have 6 kids and you have no one to watch them, you can't take all the kids to the appointment. So what are you going to do? You may skip your appointment. So things like that, I think are probably more relevant now in terms of barriers to care than just plain distrust of the medical system. I think another thing though is that there's a lot of information out there now, good and bad, with the internet and with social media especially. So a lot of people will find something on social media or the internet and sort of latch onto it as the truth without doing their due diligence and without doing research on it. Even in terms of supplements and pills and things like that, because you can get into trouble with some of these supplements if you're sort of overdosing on certain vitamins, et cetera. So I think there's a gap in the information out there, and in people are seeking answers, and I don't think that currently we have the infrastructure set up in the health system to provide all the answers that people are seeking. So I think that leads to some questioning of the medical system and some distrust.
Yeah. Erica, since you are boots on the ground with people regularly, what is your experience of how you feel people are not as trustful as maybe if they did trust more, that they could experience the relief that they need?
I think one is, what the doctor just was talking about was just historical data, that, we've heard all these things. And so it's like, I don't want that. I don't want them to, same thing with clinical trials, and I was one at 39. I was like, no, you're not doing a clinical trial on me, but now I have a different perspective about it. Now I feel like it's necessary because we're underrepresented in those areas and we're being treated with medications that we're not, our DNA is not a part of, and we know that Black people, we do cancer differently, so but I also feel that I'm gonna speak from experience, just boots on the ground. I think that people don't trust the medical system because sometimes we feel like we're cattle. It's just kind of like, let me get you in and let me get you out. You don't, our questions are not being answered, or they're not being answered to where we understand it. I had my own, issue with my mom. I'm glad that I did go through what I went through, and I said, God put me in this position so that for this moment, right, for her. And I felt like, there was a specialist that was a renowned doctor. I went and found the one that was, the big one for triple negative, but I think, it was some cultural differences, even though we're both African Americans. It was some cultural differences there, the way in which we were handled sometimes. I thought that was, something that would definitely call, I had to be there. I wanted to make sure that my mother was not going. My mother worked for the Joint Commission, so she understood protocols and procedures and all the things. But I wanted to make sure that I was present because I did not trust. It got to a point where I did not trust not being there with her, as well as my one of her radiologists. Like, I had to go to the hospital administration because it got to the point that I was like, wait a minute. So it's a lot of, layers, a lot of barriers, implicit biases. It's a lot of things that, we experience as women, and especially as Black women. They feel like, one of the doctors said to ask my mom, she had to get radiation and they had to put this mask on. When they put it on, it was wet, it was wet and gooey. When it dried up, when they tried to lock her in, it's like they locked her head in and she couldn't breathe. And he was just like, "What, did your head get too big?" I mean, it was just things that I'm like, wait, hold on for a second, so I just feel that it's a lot of reasons. It's a lot of reasons. But luckily, because of, people like Doc and people like myself and people like you just coming out talking about, as Black women, because you got to see people that look like you too. And you got to see people thrive, and you got to know that people are knowledgeable. It's just not like somebody coming out just talking out the blue. You come and, you see people that you believe in, and they are, not just saying, "Hey, I want you to do this because of, some farm money that you're going to get." This is like, look, this is real life. You and I, we sisters, we in the same space, right? And so this is what I've done. This is what I trust. This is all the things. And so, people are becoming, more willing to tell their stories. They're becoming more willing to go to the doctor, even though that there's so many different barriers and disparities that we are still dealing with on a day-to-day basis, that are outside of even the treatment, not just the treatment. You got to get to treatment first, and so it's so many things that we are still facing. So I think it's a lot of reasons that, a lot of reasons, good reasons that we have medical distress, but then there's some reasons that, are just, you know, we just have to get out of our own way sometimes as well too. And, you're afraid, you hear cancer, it's like, I'm gonna die. And it's not a death sentence. You know what I mean? Not always a death sentence.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Doc, can you talk about
Yeah.
the age range and
Yeah.
maybe what could be done to address younger
Yeah.
issues?
Yes. So as many know, the guidelines recently changed. So the USPSTF now recommends that women get mammograms starting at age 40. But I just want to emphasize that's the minimum. Okay, so you should at least start getting them by age 40. But there are women that should be getting them even younger. And so those are women with a family history. Those are women who have, actually have a mass or they feel something in their breast. They should obviously be checked and treated earlier, but regular screenings should at least start at 40. There are some organizations now that are arguing that for women of color that we should start even earlier. But the recommendation now is that we at least discuss, starting at age 25, we discuss our risk with our physician or with our healthcare provider and figure out what kind of testing we need. The other issue is breast density. Younger women have more dense breasts. And so that makes screening a little more difficult. And so the recommendation there is to do 3D mammograms and to do ultrasounds. And in some cases, depending on family history, you may also need an MRI of the breast for your screening. So all of those things should be discussed at an early age, starting at age 25 with your physician to figure out what kind of screening you need and when you need to start that screening.
And I'm sorry, I was just going to cut in and say, as you were just talking about that, I'm in that category. My breast, I was
Mhm.
diagnosed at 39, I'm
Yeah.
54 right now.
Yes.
And my breasts are very dense. So my supplemental screening, which I think
Mhm.
women should get supplemental screenings, period,
Mhm. Mhm.
is the MRI. I went from the
Yeah.
ultrasounds and now I do MRIs 6 months after I do my mammogram for that,
Right.
for that reason.
Exactly.
Latia, if you could add your experience of being under 40 and what you feel like is necessary, especially as you work on legislation and research, what have you found and from your own experience could be done to help educate women at an earlier age, even before they're technically supposed to be tested?
One of my biggest things is encouraging women, especially us as Black women, is to advocate for yourself. And if you're scared to speak up, take your loud friend with you that's not scared to say anything. And that's mostly because a lot of times we're dismissed when we're underage, and we are dismissed because of age. And so we have to be persistent about our ask, about what we feel and what we know is really going on with our bodies. I know me personally, I know my body very, very well. And so when there is something wrong, I immediately know. And if I feel like I'm not getting the attention that I need, then I'm moving on to another doctor. I'm going to find somebody else. So I think for women under 40, even over 40, sometimes we're just scared to speak up. We're scared that, if we say or do something wrong, we're not going to get the care we needed. We're not going to get the care we needed anyway if we don't say anything. So, one of my biggest things is you have to say something. I can say in my own journey, there was a nurse practitioner that stepped in that wasn't always at my practice, but she was stepping in because the doctor was out and our nurse practitioner was out, so she was filling in. I didn't like her. And I told my oncologist, I said, I don't ever want to see her again. And I did not. I don't play about my care. And so if we feel that there is something wrong, if we feel that we are unheard, it is okay to move around. Before I settled on my doctor, I saw two. And I saw two different oncologists. When I saw the second one, I looked at my mother, I said, oh, I already know who I'm going with. I already know because I had the oncologist I settled with. He sat with me. He took me in another room for 2 hours and answered every single question uninterrupted for 2 hours. The second doctor was like, I was coming in for my yearly checkup. He was like, oh, okay, you have cancer and I'll see you next month. Wait, hold on, wait. Wait, what? Like, no, that's not good enough for me. I was blessed to have excellent care. Not everyone gets the care that I honestly received. I had my updates and my chart was there the same day. That's a good and a bad thing depending on the type of personality that you are. I had all my results less than 24 hours. Anything that I asked my doctor, it was given. Finances, covering certain medications that weren't necessarily always covered. The financial department took care of that for me. They provided me with grants. Must speak up. And also, sometimes it does help to find someone who can relate or looks like you in whatever way that looks for you. Whether that's getting, if you can find a doctor who is African American or a person of color, because you feel more comfortable. If you find a doctor who's Asian, you feel more comfortable.
Okay. So, as a coach, so my, other than journalism, my background is in coaching and mindset. And I know that as women in general, we are stressed out, right? We're stressed out. We're working more hours than we should. We're juggling more balls than we should have. We are maxed out mentally, physically, emotionally, often financially, which plays a role into our mental. How do you feel the role of stress really comes into play as it relates to receiving any kind of illness, but particular notification that you're ill? But in many illnesses, I believe that stress plays a role. How would
Right.
you all feel about what role stress plays in actually having breast cancer?
Well, what's interesting is now there's new research that has found that it directly causes breast cancer. Stress does. So there's something called an allergenic load, and so that is a measure of the stress in your life and how it impacts your health. And so, as you mentioned, it can impact it in multiple ways. But now there are studies showing the direct link between stress and cancer. And I think just thinking about my friends, family, people who have had cancer. I mean, we've had pretty, stressful lives, stressful careers. So it makes sense. And unfortunately, that stress disproportionately falls upon Black women, as we know, just because of financial stress, just even racism, even the history of our people, is a stress. There are also studies now showing that that stress can be passed through the DNA, so we're carrying the stress of our ancestors and what happened to them. And all this can lead to health outcomes, which, to me, it's a really exciting field because we didn't know this before. We kind of knew it. We kind of knew that, it must have an impact, but now there are actual studies showing that impact. But there are things that we can do about it too to sort of mitigate that. There's a lot of talk like on social media now about the soft life and about, self-care and things like that. But there's really something to that. I mean, there's
Yes,
really something to, making sure you get your naps, making sure you take your PTO, making sure that, you aren't just in a world of stress every single day and that you take time out, maybe even getting off of social media for a while, maybe sort of isolating yourself, going on a retreat, all of those things now, I think, in retrospect, when I look at, my career, my life, and my cancer journey, I think, could have had a big, impact had I started doing those things earlier. But I think, we can make a decision at any point to change our story. And that's what I think the three of us here have definitely done. And as a cancer survivor, I take it very seriously, the fact that I need to escape, I need to travel, I need to, enjoy life more than I was in the past. And I think we really need to look at that link between stress and disease more seriously.
absolutely. And really be more unbothered than
Yes.
than we are used to being,
Yes.
because we are used to, taking on all the life's pressures and stresses, not just
Yeah.
of ourselves, but everybody. And
Exactly.
we have to do a whole lot less of that to stay
Yeah.
healthy and happy and dis-ease free.
Exactly.
The base of a lot of my coaching and clients that I've worked with over the years is that dis-ease is
Mhm.
because we are in a state of dis-ease, whether it's
Mhm.
lack of forgiveness of self or others.
Yeah.
That takes up a huge amount of what people are holding on to, especially
Mm.
this time of year, holidays, things like that, where we are running into our triggers. We are triggered.
Mhm.
And there's so much of a season of loss that happens, memories, triggers, and things that happen to us. But we're so busy on the go that we're not checked in and
Mm.
really paying attention to what we need to be um, doing for self. And so
Right.
self-care is bigger than get our hair done, get our nails done. Those are cute necessities. But I'm going to say that eye exam, that mammogram are up there with very important things that we need to be making sure are on the calendar. And let me just say this, ladies, all ladies, women listening, please do not just take care of your husbands and your children. Put yourself on your own list. It is imperative that you do for you in addition to doing for your family. But a lot of times we end up caretaking for everyone else and we miss those symptoms that Latia said. I know my body. I know when something is off, but if you're so busy that you're not tuned in, that's how we miss those things where we thought we knew until we didn't. I want to switch things up a little bit. Miss Erica, you have a real movement, right? And so your organization really has been focused on creating more of a movement than just focused in a moment, right? So, different shades of pink for you is a big movement and expanding. Can you share more with us about what that means for you?
Yeah, I started Different Shades of Pink when I got out of treatment, and the reason I started it because I saw so many barriers and disparities that were plaguing the African American community. I came in and I'm like, okay, we got to go eat, go to Whole Foods, get this, get that, I'm on this whole Dr. Sabies, thing, and people were looking at me like, girl, I'm trying to get the lights on, I'm trying to, I'm trying to find a meal that can stretch for my whole family. And then some people had insurance and they didn't have enough insurance, so some of the treatments they couldn't get those, and I was like, who can help these people? Like, this doesn't make sense. It just what didn't it didn't calculate in my world that I was living in. So I said, let me do what I can do, and I didn't know what I can do. I consider myself an ant in the world, meaning that it's so many people that I felt can do more. But then I said, you know what, I'm gonna do what I can do. So I started this race bracelet line, and I made the bracelets really really dope because I said I want people to wear them all the time, and to for people to have conversations about them. And I, raised money. Our first person that we helped, her name was Elizabeth Rivera. She was an out of work flight attendant. One of her pills was $200 and she needed a $40 copayment and she didn't have it. So we sold bracelets, and I think it was like $900 at the time. And we gave that so that she can, finish that out. And it just spiraled. And I said, you know what? I don't want to sit behind a desk and wait for people to call in, to say, hey, I need some help. And they got to fill out all these long applications and you got to make this much money. I said, people will, even middle class people needed help. But more than anything, they needed hope. And so, my focus was African American people. And I didn't feel like that I was excluding anybody. I just felt like I was correcting the system that was broken. You know what I mean? Because we are the ones that are dying more often, from the disease. So I said I got on my gym shoes and my blue jeans and I gathered my friends together and I didn't know what I was doing. But we just went and showed up. I went to my girlfriend and I, we flew to 4 different cities and we were trying to get to one country in 4 days and just bless people that we didn't even know. And so when we did that, I just got a high off of it. And I said, this is healing from myself, as well. I said, empathy and equity should be able to be in the same breath and in the same room and the access. And since everybody didn't have it, let me do as much as I can. Let me build a platform and let me, just stand on the platform. And I use myself, my photography, that I was actually the face of it at the time. And I would just do crazy stuff. And, I wanted people to see me living life, but also I wanted to get their attention so I can give them the message so that I can tell them the story and tell them to tell your stories. And it became a domino effect. And so that's what we did. I turned my Jeep into the Brave Chick Mobile. Brave Chick is an alias that I created. And she was this bad bug girl that just, she was what I needed as well. She really wasn't me. I needed her too. And so we went and, knocked on people's doors. We were strangers. Everybody let us in. It's so crazy in the world nowadays, but everybody let us in and we would go in and it was a big celebration. But what we were doing was giving them what they needed, because millions of people are dying every single day and in real time. And we said, you know what, how can you get to survivorship if you don't have what you need today? But a lot of people don't want to just take charity. So we made it into a celebration. Like we inducted them into our village and, gave them all the things and just to make them feel like, Dag, I'm a part of something. And when you become a part of something, you can keep people in the ring. You can keep them fighting. They're looking at you like, oh, I want to be like her. And I'm like, well, shoot, I want to be like you. So we have this, you create this big blueprint, and everybody jump in. And so it's just a whole tribe of sisters and brothers. My Antoine Muhammad, I don't know if you know Twan, but Twan died from breast cancer. That was like, my little brother. And so for me, it's just been a backhand blessing. Nobody wants to have breast cancer or be in this club, but I made breast cancer dope. You know what I mean? I made it like, look, we got it. We're not going to die from it. Some people do die, but in my mind, I changed the narrative and said, you know what, I'm going to live. It's not anymore someday, one day, it's today. So whatever's happening today, let's deal with today. Let's enjoy the day. Let's, all your dreams, everything that you want to do, try to manifest it in the moment, and then get people in that same mindset. So as you're going through the journey, you in chemo, we showing up in chemo, we taking you, we're sitting there, the doctors are telling you one thing and we questioning the doctors, we are like, yeah, this is what we are talking about. Is there any other treatment options that they can have that, other than the standard of care, all the things that we have learned from the blueprint. And we decided to, just share it among sisters. And we had deltas and AKAs and everybody coming, taking off their jackets and they putting on one jacket, a DSOP jacket, and we just changed what the story of, the ribbon is, what it stands for. It stands for awareness, but for us, it's an awakening. Because again, Black women, we deserve a place where we can come and we're not an afterthought in the breast cancer conversation, where our dignity and our DNA and our, and our trials and the behaviors that we have to deal with, it means something and it matters. So that's why, I created this platform because I want us to matter. And we do.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And to that end, the Chicago Defender this year celebrates 120 years of legacy and influence and storytelling for our people, right? For us, by us. And as I have entered into this space of telling stories, I recognize that we are the history in the making now. And these are interviews and conversations that people will look back on and glean knowledge and information as we are the new storytellers and the new voices of influence. But politics is hot and heavy and something we should work really hard to stay stress-free from. But Latia, is there any particular thing that a regular woman who isn't knocking down Springfield or doors in DC like you are can do to help legislation, what would you tell us to do?
You know what? Actually, is really pay attention to what types of bills are on the floor. Just recently on, I think it was October 14th, now that I think of it, there was a bill on the floor that was talking about prescription drug affordability boards. And we don't have what we call PDABs, or prescription drug affordability boards, in Illinois. And what that is that board actually kind of determines what the cost and affordability of drugs look like. Then under that, you also have these programs called 340B programming, where pharmacies are getting certain discounts for people in the community to be able to afford drugs, but they are not appropriately using that money to feed it back into the community or pass down those cost savings. So, which is really important, especially when you think about those low income neighborhoods that have all of these different pharmacies, in areas where lower income neighborhoods usually have also a higher prevalence of some type of, chronic illness or disease or something like that. So it's not just a breast cancer thing. Prescription drugs are for everybody. Everybody needs them at some point in time, and it's even worse when you also are dealing with some type of chronic illness. And so just pay attention to those little things, because those things do matter, and you can call your representative and say, "Hey, I am for or against this. We need this. This is what we need. Yes, this is being misappropriated." Because we need those cost savings. We need that, because if you really look at your prescription, especially if you don't have insurance, and you look at how much that prescription really cost you, and you had to pay that out of pocket, you'll be sitting there looking like, how am I going to do this? Like, some of these drugs cost a mortgage or more.
Yeah.
And so I really say, really start looking outside of just your local community, and look at, or I should say, stop looking at things on the larger scale, because a lot of times the first thing we go is straight to the White House when everything is happening right here in our backyard, right? So look in your own backyard and really pay attention to what's going on. And if you don't like something, it takes nothing to make a phone call. If you don't talk to the rep, you'll definitely talk to somebody in their office, and they are supposed to relay the message. So make sure that you're paying attention from that local level, on what's really going on from a healthcare standpoint.
Excellent. Well, ladies, I really feel that, we have just taken a moment in time to talk about some elements that are not the general conversation. The general conversation is so broad and not personal and doesn't feel relatable or sometimes survivable because the overarching statistics say. But you all are amazing examples of not just surviving, but thriving and sharing in a way that makes your experience extremely impactful and legacy building. So, if we could wrap up with a round robin of what is legacy for you in this stage of your life, and let people know how they can support what you're doing and follow your journey as well. Doc, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I would say, and you touched on this, put your own oxygen mask on first. We know that quote,
Baby.
and that's exactly what you were talking about. So
Yeah.
I think at this point in my life and my career, that's what I'm doing. I'm currently on sabbatical and not in my former role. And I'm working on some things, like I said, in my sister's foundation. So, I hope that part of her legacy will be to educate women about breast cancer, in addition to, celebrate the things that she did in her career and the trailblazer that she was. But I plan to continue to work with organizations, as I mentioned, like Equal Hope, which is really boots on the ground, working with women in the community, women of color, and women who may not have all of the resources that they need to deal with this, and provide them with someone to hold their hand through the whole process, and to make sure that they're getting the tests and the treatment, and the care that they deserve and need. So that's really what I hope, becomes part of my legacy, and I can wish to continue on my sister's legacy in that way as well.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing her personal story with us because, there's no one on earth that does not know Ananda Lewis. And we were absolutely devastated to hear, but having a personal understanding that she did do things and she did fight, just not in all the ways, is also a part of understanding her legacy. So thank you for that. Um, Erica, what is legacy for you right now, and how can we support you?
And I love me some Ananda. I really did. So I'm sorry about that too. But for me, legacy is it's not about what you leave on, in books or on buildings. It's how you make people feel. It's, what you leave inside of people. And for me, I just feel like, I'm no longer, my goal isn't just to be a survivor, it's to thrive, and it is to build something that's bigger than myself, that's going to live, when I'm gone, and my spirit is, just floating around here somewhere. So I think for me, I just want to sow seeds of courage and of, education and empowerment, into women and men, and to let them know that they can keep on moving. And I hope that my presence, and I hope that the way that I move in this world, inspires people to to have a similar legacy where we become dominoes in our spirits to other people.
That's so important. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Latia, what is legacy for you now, and how can we support what you're doing and learn from what you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So right now, I have coined legacy for me, and that came up as a topic from somebody else. And I say legacy for me is transparency. I want to be able to leave behind a truth and an openness about what my whole journey is about, right? Not just breast cancer, but just even life. We live in a time of social media, so everything is about that highlight reel. But I want to bring and I want to leave behind transparency, because one of the things that I noticed, especially amongst us as being African American, is that we are not transparent. We're not transparent about health. We're not transparent about finances. And so I want to be open, because the next generation can't learn if if we're not transparent about what's going on. If you think about illnesses in your family and you find out, oh, someone was sick, that you just know that they were sick and they passed, but you don't know of what. But that could be the very next thing that can save that next generation. So my legacy is all about transparency. And as far as supporting me, one of the things that I would like for people to do is actually get involved. You do not have to be a medical professional or have a medical background to get involved in any advocacy work at any level, at the legislative level, at the research level. My research work, I currently actually I have to get online and do some reviews after this, is I'm reviewing applications from scientists and doctors who are seeking money from the government to continue on their research. So I'm sitting on a breast cancer panel under epidemiology. I'm coming in as a consumer reviewer, as someone who has actually experienced breast cancer, and I'm looking at this research and I'm like, hey, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses, and how is that going to affect the people in the future as we go forward in that research. So you don't have to have any type of background. All you have to do is have a heart for it. So.
Mhm. Absolutely. Uh, Gatekeeping is killing us in so many ways. I feel like we could do a whole after the show on gatekeeping, menopause, and possibly the links of all of that. I'll have to have you all back. We'll have to have some more chat because I am entering into the perimenopause phases, or as my husband has called it, cougar puberty. And so I know that us sharing is, hey, baby puppy. I know that us sharing our stories is how we survive, and our community is is one that has needs to hear voice and story, needs to connect people and experiences. We don't learn from books. We don't learn from things that we are supposed to read, even when they are presented to us. And we are people that have learned so much from sharing with others, because that's where the trust is. And so, if you are a woman that has never done a self exam, please do one today. Stop right now, whatever you are doing. If you have not booked your mammogram, please stop what you are doing and do it today. It is imperative, ladies, that we take care of ourselves and that we put ourselves first. It is not enough to just prove that you are superwoman. That is not what is at stake right now. But your health and your life and everything that matters really is important. And so I want you to get the test that you need. Don't be afraid to pursue advocacy and information for yourself. Wherever it is that you find yourself, there is help. There is help out there for you. There are resources that all of the people that you have met today are willing to give, to share. So do not allow yourself to be ignorant at home by yourself. Please reach out, use your resources. And if you were inspired by someone here today, please follow all these ladies, follow their journey, follow their personal sharing, because they are showing you what not just living or surviving is like, but what thriving is like. And we must do that not just for ourselves, but for others to show and tell the story. And so thank you, ladies, and thank you from the Chicago Defender for creating yet another piece of history, because we are the voices of influence for our time, and we have so much to be grateful for those who have come before us. So thank you so much, ladies. I appreciate you, and we will continue to spread this story and spread the news that you have shared with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.